Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host, and today I am pleased to welcome Stefan Leipold. He is the CEO of Stark Enterprises. Welcome.
Beautiful. Good morning. Thank you.
And of course, Corey Ranslem. He's the CEO of IMSA Global. How are you?
I'm living the dream, Ria. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here today.
Wonderful. Well, the reason we're here today is we're talking about the IMO 2021. Now, people are getting sick and tired of hearing about it, but at the other end, nobody's doing anything about it still. So, I'm sorry that you're getting sick and tired of hearing about it, but January 1st, 2021 is when this is supposed to be implemented. Why, Corey, tell me, why are these people not paying attention to the fact that this has to be done, and why they don't realize how important it is?
That's a great question, and I think it's not just the large yacht industry. It's an issue systemic to the maritime industry. When you look at regulations that come out from the IMO and then go to the different countries and the flag states, it takes a while for the maritime industry to adopt those, and it usually takes people, unfortunately, getting fines or their certificates of operation pulled until they come into compliance with it. So it's always been in this industry across the board kind of an apathy when it comes to new regulations, and it seems to take everybody so much longer here to implement, and not just the cyber. If you look at all the other regulations that have been implemented over the years, we are very slow adopters when it comes to trying to put these measures in place.
Well, Stefan, you come from a hacker's background, as most people that are amazing at what they do, especially with cybersecurity, do. You know yourself that, and you've worked many, many times with homes and making sure cybersecurity, mansions, et cetera, businesses, corporations. What are your concept on the fact that people, even people that you have worked with, for example, in their corporation, why do they just forget the minute they get to the yacht that perhaps they might need the same sort of security?
I think there's two reasons. The first one I figured out is, which is a corporate thinking, is if you invest in something that is not client facing, like if you have a brand new fancy office, a nice car, whatever the client sees, it's not essential. If you have a $20,000 server or IT equipment, whatever it is, client doesn't see it, so it's probably not considered mandatory or necessary. The interesting part is when the pandemic started, we set up a lot of computers working from home for corporations. And interestingly enough is the moment they left their office, they left also the security thinking at home. So we had CEOs working on Windows XP computers connecting to their corporation. And so I think it's just the mindset that this is my work and that's my private life. And so nobody hacks me because it only happens to others. And I think that's the biggest way of thinking. It just doesn't happen to me, only to others, until it just happened,
What are the consequences, Corey, if somebody were to be able to hack into whatever? I mean, nowadays it's even onboard systems, isn't it? I mean, they could hack into your onboard systems. They could access all your information. What would the consequences potentially be if somebody decided to target you on your yacht?
And that's a really good question, Ria. The consequences could be very far-reaching depending on what type of information they have on board and what type of information the hackers get to. They could blackmail you, your family, your corporation. They could hold data ransom for payment of Bitcoin, and we've seen that happen. And there could be pretty devastating issues and consequences out of something like that. And I've heard a number of stories about things like this that have actually happened to fairly wealthy people, fairly well-known people, where data or pictures or information have been compromised, and then they're asked to pay ransom to get that back. And that is becoming more and more common these days. I was doing some research the other day and read a statistic that attacks on maritime industry assets in the last year have gone up 900%. At this time, there's not many people in the maritime industry that I know of who have not been hacked or interfered with by outside forces in some way, shape, or form, and have lost money in that. And it's all the way from a few $1,000s into a few $1 million, depending on the type of data that was compromised. And I guess to kind of add on that, as we talk to people, we're seeing that people are not taking and Stefan could probably, agree to this too, is we're seeing people not take some of the basic security initiatives when they leave that bubble of the office and they go to the yacht or they go home or they're on vacation. They're not doing the things that they need to do to protect themselves and to protect their data.
Do you think that the secrecy in the industry is part of the reason why people aren't aware that it is happening, as you said, an increase in like 900%? Do you think it's because nobody likes to talk about the fact that they've been taken advantage of, or nobody likes to talk about any of the negativities that may happen?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I mean, when you see a company, and we've seen it a few times just over the past couple of months, where a company's website and their data has been basically hacked, the website has been hijacked for a Bitcoin payment. When you see that from a company perspective, it's right out there for everybody to see. But when you're talking about a wealthy individual or someone who's famous, who's on board their yacht or through their yacht, you don't typically see that, and it's pretty hush hush because the hackers will reach out to them directly to pay and say, hey, here's what we have. So you don't see that publicized as much as you do when a company or a larger organization, gets hacked.
Stefan, as far as marinas go, I mean, most people, we tend to download regular software that gives us some sort of protection. It's probably not the best, but at least we try. Do you notice that in marinas around the world, and I do know that you had the chance to go to a marina and do a little investigating of your own at one stage a few years back, do you find that they're not even doing the minimum?
I've been in 3 marinas now, and the answer is most of them had actually 2 of them only had a regular router. That was it. And the other marina had at least a better equipment, but it was not really secured. And I want to touch base on something that Corey just said. 2 weeks ago, I think it was the state of New York issued a law that if you pay a ransom to Russia, China, whoever it is a felony because you're funding terrorism. So they ruled it actually illegal. So if you want to get your data back, including whatever family pictures or your account from Instagram, whatever it is, you commit a crime. So if law enforcement will figure this out, you're actually punishable by law.
And I think it was interesting too, Stefan, if I remember, the U.S. Office of Foreign Asset Control came out and basically said the same thing, that it's a felony, it's a federal felony to be able to pay that ransom in Bitcoin. So there are, repercussions on the side of, paying that particular, individual or organization where it is considered contributing to terrorism. So there are, felony issues on that if you do pay that ransom.
Right.
So either way, you're either out a whole ton of cash or you're out your data. That's it. End of.
Yeah, but it's just, I just don't understand why people don't take the basic precautions and looking at what they can do to secure their networks. Hackers, and Stefan can even expand on this, but hackers are like the guy driving down the street looking for the house to burglarize. You know what? If I see the sign out in the front yard that says that I've got a fancy alarm system, most likely the burglar is going to keep going. Same when you get into cybersecurity. When they look at trying to penetrate your networks and they see, oh, they've got a firewall, they've got this piece, they've got that piece, it's going to take me much longer unless they're targeting you as an individual or a business. If it's something random, if they see that there's measures in place, typically they're going to say, okay, I'm going to go on to the next person or, to the next theoretical house, because I know I'm eventually going to find someone that's wide open.
The interesting thing is, I want to add something to it. So without having any Wi-Fi password, you can literally stand in your car scanning all the Wi-Fi networks, and the scanner will tell you which equipment name is sending out the network. You can see if it's a Cisco firewall or if it's a Linksys router. Obviously, I take the weaker device, which is a $50 Linksys router, and hacking a firewall from Cisco. So yeah, I agree. I would go for the weaker one.
It sounds so simple, it really does sound so simple. If some kid, and nowadays, I mean, kids are starting on the internet and trying to figure these things out when they're 10, 12 years old. And by the time they get to be 18 or 19, they could easily do that kind of hacking if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And across the board, we look at, the hackers are individuals, but there's also state and non-state actors that are perpetrating these crimes. When you look at, countries like North Korea, who have a fairly depressed economy, it's difficult for them to get hard currency. So what's the best thing for them to do is basically to go in the hacking game to get people to pay them Bitcoin, because that's a lot more valuable than really anything else. The cybersecurity is the wave of the future where crime is going to happen, and it's going to continue to get worse. And I hate to sound like, the big dark cloud, but, people really have to sit up and take a look at, people like, well, I don't care if, someone gets into my phone or into this, but if you start to think about what data you have on just your mobile device, and what data you have in your computer, and what data can be compromised, it can be pretty devastating for people to get in and clean out your accounts or hijack your social media. And it's just interesting to see that this is kind of now the new frontier of where war is taking place in the cyber realm, and people really have to wake up to the precautions, especially people who have large yachts and who are doing work on board their vessels. They really need to take a look at the security they have, because it's very easy to find out who owns what yacht, and then hackers will actually target and go after those individuals because they know, hey, they've got data, and if I can get a hold of any of that these guys are wealthy enough that they're gonna pay.
Well, and oftentimes when you start getting to the ultra high net worth individuals, they are interconnected. So the ability to go into one and get information for another and another, it could actually create a knockoff effect.
There's something actually what most of the people are not aware of. I'm pretty sure in the beginning of the year, most of the people were aware that Sycanovis hacked Microsoft, Google, Travel Eggs, QuickBooks. So I was one of the people that was working with the European and the American law enforcement, and the people came from Russia, and it was a group. It was not just one individual. The way you actually see somebody communicating, you can see we're talking to an organization, and there were millions paid in ransom. And the interesting thing these people said, and I totally agree, because if I would be a bad guy, I would do the same. They collected data over time. They didn't go to any point and just hack somebody. They collected data from multiple sources. And then at one point, they released the payload and they hacked everybody. And then there was cash day. So the amount of money being paid is probably not going to be used in a good thing. So either they're using it for terrorism or whatever it is. But people are actually seeing your network is weak, and they're collecting information, taking the information that you have about others and go to the next guy. So they build an entire network where they can just follow up everything at the same day. So they want maximum damage and maximum outcome.
And I think too, Rhea, that it goes even beyond, we at the beginning just briefly talked about the IMO 2021, and it's a specific group of vessels that have that compliance. So there's a whole slew of vessels that don't necessarily have a cybersecurity compliance. If you have a private yacht, you don't charter, you're not commercial operations, you don't have a full, safety management system, you're outside of the IMO 2021 compliance. But we talk to customers and to potential customers and say, listen, regardless of your whether you have the compliance through flag state or not, these are just basic things that you should still take a look at. And it's not expensive to do surveys and assessments and to put, some of the tools in place. It costs a lot less to do that up front than it does once your data has been compromised and once you get hacked. It could cost 10, 20, 30 or more times what you would initially pay to secure that, to be able to hopefully get it back. And once you've been targeted once, it's pretty easy for you to be targeted again. Hackers will come back around and target the same people again because people are slow to put these measures, these basic measures in place.
Well, I guess it comes down again. I mean, when you're running a business, you try to charge, a fair price so that people will talk about what a good job you've done so you can get hired again. Whereas a hacker, well, they're going in, they see you've got a massive yacht, they're going to get the most they can. And if they see that you continue to have that massive yacht, they're going to come back and get the most they can again, right? Because obviously you've got more.
Yeah. And Stefan could probably even talk to this, more than I can, being, kind of on the front line of it. But it's fascinating to see. I've known businesses and companies that we've talked to who've been hacked and who've had, accounts depleted, money stolen for fraudulent transactions. and they have not put any cybersecurity measures in place, even though they've been hit. And that to me is fascinating. And it's like your house gets robbed and you continue to not lock your door.
Kind of makes you wonder how they got to be a big corporation in the first place. Just
Yeah.
my thinking anyway. Well, how would you make the industry sort of understand, could there be possibly an insurance issue coming up in the future? Like if you don't have your IMO 2021, we're not going to insure your yacht because we aren't going to pay out in this case?
That's a great question. I'll jump in and take the first part. And I was speaking to a group of maritime attorneys and insurance folks about a week or so ago, just about this topic of cybersecurity, as everybody's trying to get their head around it, is what does insurance coverage look like? What can we cover? What don't we cover? What's the legal ramifications of an issue happening and the third-party liability and all this other stuff? So we were talking about the issues and what this looks like and the increase in the number of attacks in the maritime industry. And one of the people in the conference asked that exact question. They said, how can we get people in this industry to wake up to the fact that they need to take cybersecurity seriously to secure their boats, their facilities, networks, companies? And I said, that's a great question. I said, the one thing that could have could be a huge factor in all of this are the insurance companies themselves. The insurance companies have the power to say to their clients, whether it's a business, whether it's a yacht, whoever it is, that if you don't put the basic cybersecurity procedures in place to protect yourself, we are not going to insure you across the board. The major losses to business, to yachts, are not going to come from, fire or flooding or anything else. They're going to come from cyber. That's where the losses are going to be. So the insurance companies really are the ones that could be the kind of the pressure point for the entire industry to say, hey, we're not just not going to give you cyber coverage. We're just not going to give you coverage at all until you can prove that you've done the basics to protect your business and your assets from a potential cyber attack. So it'll be interesting to see how that, plays out. Because if say I bring my yacht into a country and I don't have cybersecurity in place, they're going to give me a fine, $5,000, $10,000. I'll write the check tomorrow, give it to them and say, okay, no big deal. But if my insurance company refuses to insure my assets, against normal operations, that's a whole different story. So it'll be interesting to see how the major insurance companies, the underwriters, and these folks step up when it comes to really making the big push for people to take a look at cybersecurity.
Crazy. Well, how much time, Stefan, does it take for someone, say, for example, today they said, you know what, we've listened to this interview, now we're taking it seriously. What is their first steps and how much time does it take for them to become IMO compliant?
I think the first thing you need to do is the same as a corporation. You need to evaluate what is on site. If there's just a router, if they have something, if they have only the navigation equipment, TV equipment, whatever they have. So once you have what is on site, you can make a battle plan how to improve it and what needs to be implemented. But I think the turnaround can be 24 to 48 hours to get everything evaluated and get it done, depending on where the vessel is. I also wanted to add something because Corey, you and I, we spoke about the third-party liability. If somebody gets hacked and somebody steals your client's information and his brand new secret to a soup, then who is responsible for it?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And Stefan and I work together quite a bit. We're partners in the cybersecurity side of the world, so we talk quite a bit about different strategies. But your third-party liability, and I'm not an insurance expert, really depends on what your carrier says that they will and won't cover. And right now, most policies don't have a third-party liability kind of coverage when it comes to the cybersecurity piece. So if my system gets hacked and I have other people's data on my system, right, well, am I covered for their loss of data? And that's a big thing when you look at like a marina or a shipyard. If I am a yacht and I'm connected to the marina's Wi-Fi network and their network gets compromised, and then I get compromised through their network and my data gets lost, that's a third-party liability claim for me against the marina. And most insurance, Some will, some won't cover that, or there'll be a limitation to that coverage. And then there's a bunch of exclusions in the policy. So if the insurance company does a post-incident investigation and finds out, hey, you didn't have the firewall configured correctly, you didn't have the router configured correctly, then the whole claim is negated, and they'll be like, well, we're not going to pay because you didn't meet the minimum requirements of the policy to have your system secured to a minimum industry standard. So, you know, the insurance piece is one that I keep getting back to on this is that's where it could be really interesting, especially for a large marina. If they get hacked and they have, you know, say 20 yachts in there that are compromised, that could be a multi-million-dollar lawsuit.
Multi-million-dollar lawsuit, depending on which marina it is, that's for sure. You know, if you've got super yachts in a marina and they target, you know, 6 of these massive super yachts, you know, that's insanity. So both of you are in the business then of helping to ensure IMO 2021 compliance.
Yep.
And so what we'll do is we'll make sure to supply the information below this interview, because, you know, I'm not sure how many interviews I'm going to have to do on this just to get the point across, because I have done a fair amount, and I'm sure that I probably will do a few more and have you back again to talk about it. But hopefully we get the message across. And is there anything you'd like to sort of let people know before we leave, Stefan, about why this is so necessary?
I mean, I keep telling people, bad guys don't sleep, so does not the money. Even if you take off, the bad guys don't.
Yeah. And Corey, you?
Sure. The one thing that I would say, and it's, I think, one of Stefan's points earlier is, you know, it's not very expensive to get that basic assessment done of your yacht, of your business. And it's usually something our team, and when I say that, I mean, you know, Stefan and I and our companies working together can usually get that done within a day or two and get recommendations back to you, that some of those recommendations can be carried out by your IT company. There's some fixes that you can even do on your own, and then there's other things that may be of a higher level that we would need to help with. But it's fairly easy and fairly cost effective to get the process started, and that's what we always recommend to our clients when we're working together is, hey, the first thing is for us to come in and do that assessment, and then from there put the battle plan together on how to mitigate any potential issues you'd have.
One last thing I'd like to add, sorry, IT guys are not cybersecurity specialists.
No.
It's a big mistake.
Even I know that, and I'm not even a techie in the slightest, but even I know that. Well, thank you, gentlemen, ever so much, and I hope that we did reach a few more, and as I said, maybe we'll have you back again in the future and we'll reach a few more. I have a feeling, though, that it's going to come down to January 1st, 2021, when all of a sudden, perhaps the insurance companies say, we're not going to be insuring you, and we're going to see a whole pile of people frantically trying to become compliant.
Yep.
Thank you, Ria.
Once again, Stefan Leipold, CEO of Stark Enterprises, and Corey Ranslem of IMSA Global CEO. We thank you both for your time. You've been watching another episode of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I have been your host. Please tune in again for another episode.